Admiral Zexthara stood on the bridge of the Sovereign Dominion, her 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed the most powerful fleet in galactic history. 3,000 vessels stretched across space in perfect formation, each ship a masterpiece of Caltharian engineering. The massive dreadnoughts alone could crack planets, while the smaller cruisers carried enough firepower to level entire cities. This was the eternal fleet, pride of the Galactic Empire, and today it would finally crush the last pocket of resistance that dared challenge their rule. The target was simple enough. A small human colony on the edge of the galaxy had refused to surrender after the Empire's conquest of Earth 6 months ago. Most human worlds had fallen within weeks, their primitive weapons no match for superior Caltharian technology. But this tiny outpost called Haven's Rest continued to broadcast defiant messages across the galaxy, inspiring other species to resist. The Emperor himself had ordered its destruction as an example to anyone foolish enough to oppose the Empire. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the human colony," reported Communications Officer Veltar, his voice carrying the usual disdain reserved for inferior species. "They're demanding we withdraw from their space." A ripple of laughter passed through the bridge crew. Zexthara herself allowed a small smile to cross her scaled features. The audacity of these humans never ceased to amuse her. They had witnessed the complete annihilation of their homeworld, seen their mighty fleets reduced to floating scrap metal, and yet somehow they still believed they could stand against the Empire. "Put on the main screen," she ordered. The bridge fell silent as the image of a human appeared before them. He was middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and tired eyes that still burned with determination. Admiral Marcus Chun, according to their intelligence files, a veteran of humanity's failed defense of Earth. "This is Admiral Chun of the Human Colonial Defense Force," the figure said, his voice steady despite the impossible odds he faced. "You are in violation of Colonial Charter 77 Alpha. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences." The bridge erupted in laughter again. Even Zexthara couldn't suppress her amusement. Consequences? From a single colony defended by perhaps a dozen outdated human vessels. She activated the comm channel. "Admiral Chun, this is Admiral Zexthara of the Eternal Fleet. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Comply, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will make your suffering legendary throughout the galaxy." Chin's expression didn't change. 1 hour then. We'll be waiting." The transmission cut off. Arrogant to the end, muttered Tactical Officer Krendus. "Shall we begin the bombardment now, and save ourselves the wait?" "No," Zexthara replied, settling back in her command chair. "Let them have their hour. It will make our victory all the sweeter when we demonstrate the futility of resisting the Empire." She had learned to savor these moments. Soon, every species in the galaxy would know the same crushing despair that came with facing the Eternal Fleet. The hour passed slowly. Zexthara watched with satisfaction as her fleet maintained perfect formation, weapons charging, shields at maximum power. Long-range sensors showed the pitiful human defense force gathering near Haven's Rest, 15 small ships that barely registered as threats on their targeting systems. It would be a massacre, but a necessary one. "Admiral, we're detecting some unusual readings from the human position," reported sensor technician Morval, her voice uncertain. "There are energy signatures we can't identify. Probably some last-ditch human technology," Zexthara dismissed. "Their desperation often leads to innovation, though it never saves them in the end." She stood and walked to the forward observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see the distant glow of stars and the faint blue that was Haven's Rest. "Time's up," she announced. "All ships advance to firing positions. We'll begin with a demonstration on their outermost defenses, then move in for the kill. Make it slow. Make it visible. I want every species monitoring this battle to understand what happens when you defy the Empire." The Eternal Fleet began its advance, 3,000 ships moving in perfect synchronization. It was a sight that had struck terror into countless worlds. Each vessel was a floating fortress, bristling with weapons that could punch through any known defense. The humans would have moments to comprehend their fate before being vaporized. Admiral, Morval's voice was now tinged with concern. Those energy readings are intensifying. And there's something else. We're detecting massive gravimetric disturbances throughout the system. Gravimetric disturbances? Zextera frowned. Such phenomena were usually associated with stellar collapse or artificial wormhole generation, neither of which should be possible with human technology. Show me. The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of local space. Zextera's four eyes widened as she saw the readings. Ripples in space-time itself were spreading outward from multiple points around Haven's Rest, growing stronger with each passing second. It was unlike anything in their databases. Admiral, the human ships are moving, reported Krendus. They're forming up in attack formation. Attack formation? Zextera almost laughed again. 15 ships against 3,000? Have they lost their minds completely? But, as she watched, something cold began to creep up her spine. The human ships weren't moving normally. They seemed to flicker in and out of visual range, their positions shifting in ways that defied conventional physics. And those energy readings were off the charts now. All ships, emergency evasive maneuvers, she barked suddenly, though she couldn't explain why. Some deep instinct, honed by decades of warfare, was screaming danger. It was then that the first phantom ship appeared. It materialized directly in the center of the Eternal Fleet formation, where the flagship Dominator held position. One moment there was empty space, and the next there was a vessel unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was sleek and angular, its hull seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. No insignia marked its surface. No energy signatures betrayed its presence until the moment of arrival. "What is that?" Zextera demanded, but her bridge crew seemed frozen in shock. The phantom ship was perhaps a third the size of a Keltharian dreadnought, but something about its presence made the massive Dominator look like a toy in comparison. "Weapons signature detected," Krendus shouted. "It's targeting the Dominator." The phantom ship fired once. A beam of pure white energy lanced out and struck the Empire's most powerful warship amidships. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the Dominator began to come apart. Not explosively, not dramatically, but systematically. Its hull simply dissolved, layer by layer, as if reality itself was being unraveled. The ship's massive fusion reactors, capable of powering a small city, flickered out like candle flames. Within 30 seconds, the Dominator was gone. 3,000 crew members, including Admiral Torvash, the Emperor's own nephew, had been erased from existence. "Impossible," Zextera whispered. But, even as she spoke, 2 more phantom ships materialized within the fleet formation. Then 4 more. Then 8. "All ships, open fire," she screamed into the comm. "Target those vessels. Destroy them." The Eternal Fleet erupted in violence. Thousands of weapons fired simultaneously, enough firepower to glass a continent. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and antimatter warheads converged on the phantom ships from every direction. The space around them lit up like a star being born. When the light faded, the phantom ships hung motionless in space, completely unharmed. Their hulls hadn't even been scorched. "Shields holding at 100%, reported a trembling sensor technician aboard the cruiser Night's Edge. Similar reports flooded in from across the fleet. The phantom ships hadn't just absorbed the attack. They had ignored it completely, as if the most powerful weapons in the galaxy were nothing more than a gentle breeze. Then, the phantoms began to move. They didn't accelerate gradually like normal ships. They simply changed position, appearing and disappearing throughout the fleet formation with impossible speed. Each time one materialized, another Imperial ship died. Not destroyed, dissolved. Unmade, reduced to constituent atoms that scattered harmlessly into space. The mighty dreadnought Stellar Hammer tried to ram one of the phantom ships, its captain believing that physical contact might succeed where weapons had failed. The massive vessel, built to survive the collapse of stars, struck the phantom ship head-on at full acceleration. It passed through the mysterious vessel like smoke, then began coming apart the moment they separated. Within moments, another of the Empire's greatest warships was nothing but dispersing particles. "Admiral, we need to retreat," pleaded Krendus, his voice cracking with panic. Around them, the bridge crew was in chaos. Some were praying to ancient gods, others were calling for their families on distant worlds, and still others sat in stunned silence as they watched the impossible unfold before them. But Zextara couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her mind was trying to process what she was seeing, but it made no sense. The Eternal Fleet was the pinnacle of galactic military might. They had conquered 1,000 worlds, defeated every enemy they had ever faced. How could 15 phantom ships be systematically destroying them without taking so much as a scratch in return? "Admiral," Morval's voice cut through her shock. "We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chun." The human appeared on their screen again, but now he was standing on what looked like the bridge of one of the phantom ships. The background was unlike anything they had seen. Walls that seemed to bend light, control surfaces that responded to thought rather than touch, and crew members who moved with inhuman precision. "Admiral Zextara," Chun said, his voice calm despite the carnage surrounding them. "I warned you there would be consequences. You should have listened. What are these ships?" Zextara found her voice at last. "What technology is this? It's impossible." Chun smiled, and for the first time she saw something other than resignation in his eyes. She saw pity. "You never understood us, did you? You saw our ships, our weapons, our cities, and you thought that was all we were. You never bothered to learn what humanity really represents." Another dreadnought dissolved into nothingness. Then a cruiser. Then 3 destroyers simultaneously. The Eternal Fleet, which had started the battle with 3,000 ships, was now down to fewer than 2,000 and falling rapidly. "You conquered our worlds," Chun continued. "You killed our people. You thought you had defeated us. But you only destroyed our bodies, Admiral. You never touched our souls. And when pushed to the brink of extinction, when every hope seemed lost, humanity did what we've always done. We transcended our limitations." "That's impossible," Zextara protested. "No species can simply evolve new technology overnight. It takes centuries, millennia. Evolution." Chun laughed, and the sound was both human and something far beyond human. "Admiral, this isn't evolution. This is revolution. The humans you destroyed on Earth, the ones you thought were gone forever, they're still here. They've just learned to exist on a different level of reality." As if to prove his point, the phantom ship nearest to the sovereign dominion suddenly became transparent. Through its hull, Zextara could see the crew moving about their duties. But they weren't quite human anymore. They moved too smoothly. Their eyes held knowledge that seemed ancient despite their young faces, and around each one flickered an aura of energy that spoke of power beyond comprehension. "We try to warn you," Chun said softly. "We try to make you understand that force isn't always the answer. But you wouldn't listen. You saw only weakness where you should have seen restraint. You mistook compassion for cowardice. Now you'll learn what humans are capable of when all other options have been exhausted." The massacre continued. Ship after ship simply ceased to exist, their crews given no time to cry out, no chance to suffer, no opportunity to flee. It was almost merciful in its efficiency. The phantom ships moved through the fleet like ghosts, untouchable and inexorable. "Please," Zextara whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to Chun or to whatever gods might be listening. "We can negotiate. We can find a peaceful solution." "Can we?" Chun asked. "When we offered peace, you responded with conquest. When we sought dialogue, you answered with violence. When we begged for mercy, you chose genocide. Tell me, Admiral, what reason do we have to trust your words now?" Zextara had no answer. Around her, The bridge crew watched in horrified fascination as their proud fleet was systematically dismantled. The Eternal Fleet, terror of the galaxy, was being taught what true terror looked like. "There is one thing you can do," Chin said after a long moment. "One chance for some of your people to survive this encounter." "Anything," Zextara gasped, hating herself for the desperation in her voice, but unable to care about dignity when annihilation stared her in the face. "You will take your remaining ships and return to the Empire. You will tell them exactly what happened here. You will explain that humanity has moved beyond their ability to threaten or control. And you will deliver this message to your Emperor." Chen's expression hardened. "Every human world will be liberated. Every human survivor will be freed. Every act of cruelty against our people will be answered. The Empire has 7 days to begin compliance. After that, we will come for you all." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Around them, the Phantom ships had stopped their attack. Of the 3,000 vessels that had comprised the Eternal Fleet, fewer than 500 remained. And those survivors hung motionless in space, their crews too shocked to even attempt flight. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the Phantom ships vanished. One moment they were there, and the next they were gone, leaving only empty space and the scattered remnants of what had once been the galaxy's most powerful military force. "Admiral," whispered Communications Officer Veltar, "what are your orders?" Zextara stared at the tactical display, watching the remaining ships of her once mighty fleet slowly beginning to move, their captains finally realizing they had been spared for a purpose. She thought about the message she would have to deliver to the Emperor, about the terror she would have to convey, about the complete paradigm shift that had just occurred in the balance of galactic power. For the first time in her long military career, Admiral Zextara of the Keltharian Empire understood what it meant to be afraid #, a phantom ship cut through their fleet. And the Galactic Empire finally knew fear. Emperor Vexilin, the Eternal, sat upon the crystalline throne, his 6 arms draped across the armrests carved from the bones of the last Zephyrian resistance leader. The throne room of the Imperial Palace stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, its walls lined with the preserved heads of conquered kings and the shattered flags of fallen civilizations. For 300 years, he had ruled the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known, and for 300 years, no enemy had dared stand before him twice. Today, however, the Emperor was not alone in his vast hall. Before him knelt Admiral Zextara, her uniform stripped of all honors, her once proud posture broken by shame and terror. Behind her stood the surviving captains of what had been the Eternal Fleet, each one bearing the haunted expression of those who had witnessed the impossible. "Explain to me again," the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the cavernous chamber like distant thunder, "how 3,000 of my finest warships were destroyed by 15 human vessels." Zextara's voice was barely a whisper. "Your Magnificence, they weren't ordinary ships. They were something beyond our understanding. Our weapons passed through them harmlessly, while their attacks dissolved our vessels at the molecular level. It was as if they existed in a different layer of reality." "A different layer of reality?" The Emperor's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Are you telling me that these humans have become gods? That they've transcended the physical laws that govern the rest of us?" "I don't know what they've become, Your Magnificence," Zextara replied, her voice cracking. "But they're no longer the species we conquered." Admiral Chun spoke of revolution, of humanity moving beyond our ability to threaten them. "They gave us 7 days to comply with their demands." The Emperor rose from his throne, his massive form casting long shadows across the polished floor. At nearly 3 meters tall and built like a living weapon, Vextholen had personally killed dozens of enemy champions in single combat. His physical presence alone had broken the will of countless rebels. But as he stared down at his broken admiral, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. 7 days, he repeated slowly. And what exactly do these evolved humans demand? "The liberation of all human colonies, Your Magnificence. The release of all human slaves and prisoners." full reparations for the destruction of Earth and its colonies. And Zextera hesitated, knowing her next words might cost her life. They demand that you personally surrender to face judgment for crimes against humanity. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the Emperor's personal guards, warriors who had never shown fear in the face of any enemy, shifted nervously. The idea of their God Emperor surrendering to anyone was unthinkable. Yet the evidence of the Eternal Fleet's destruction was undeniable. "Show me the recordings again," the Emperor commanded. "Every angle, every sensor reading, everything your ships captured before their destruction." The holographic display activated, filling the center of the throne room with three-dimensional images of the battle. The Emperor watched in silence as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed by ships that seemed to exist only when they chose to. He saw weapons that could unmake matter itself, vessels that moved through space without regard for physics, and crews that had somehow transcended their original biological forms. "Have our scientists analyzed these recordings?" he asked. High Scientist Mortalen stepped forward, his usually confident demeanor replaced by obvious bewilderment. "We have, Your Magnificence. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The humans appear to have mastered technologies that we didn't even know were theoretically possible. Their ships exist in a quantum state that allows them to phase in and out of normal space-time at will. And their weapons? They don't destroy matter, Your Magnificence. They actually rewrite the quantum information that defines matter, essentially editing objects out of existence. It's not just advanced technology. It's a fundamental understanding of reality that surpasses our own by orders of magnitude." The Emperor turned to his military advisor, General Kronvek. "What are our options? Can we mount a defense against this threat?" The general's massive frame seemed to shrink under the weight of his response. "Your Magnificence, our entire military doctrine is based on superior firepower and tactical supremacy. Against an enemy that can ignore our weapons and appear anywhere at will, conventional warfare is useless. We would need to completely reimagine our approach to conflict." "Then do so," the Emperor roared. "Begin research into counter-technologies immediately. Contact our allies in the Terminus sector. Activate all sleeper agents in neutral territories. If these humans think they can dictate terms to the Empire, they will learn otherwise." But even as he spoke these words, the Emperor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the palace's controlled atmosphere. For the first time in his long reign, he was facing an enemy that might actually be beyond his ability to defeat. High Scientist Mortalen cleared his throat nervously. "Your Magnificence, there is one other matter. Our analysis suggests that the humans haven't just developed new technology. They appear to have undergone some form of consciousness evolution. The way they moved, the coordination between their ships, the seamless integration of thought and action, it suggests a level of mental development that may be as important as their technological advancement." "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning they may have transcended the limitations of individual consciousness, Your Magnificence. They could be operating as a collective intelligence while retaining individual identity. If that's true, then we're not just facing superior technology, we're facing a superior form of existence." The implications of this statement hung heavy in the air. The Caltharian Empire had built its dominance on the assumption that military might was the ultimate arbiter of galactic politics. If humanity had truly evolved beyond the need for conventional conflict, then the entire foundation of imperial power was in question. "Your Magnificence," interrupted Communications Director Velnash. "We're receiving reports from across the Empire. The human's message has somehow been broadcast on all communication channels simultaneously, in every major galactic language. Their demands are being discussed on every world, and some of our subject species are beginning to show signs of unrest." The Emperor's expression darkened. "Which species?" "The Zenthri have declared neutrality and closed their borders to Imperial ships. The Aquarians are demanding the release of all political prisoners. The Felids have recalled their ambassadors from the imperial court, and there are reports of uprising on 17 different worlds. 17. The Emperor's voice was dangerously quiet. How was that possible? We have garrison fleets on all those worlds. The uprisings began exactly 7 hours after the human message was broadcast, Your Magnificence. It's as if they were coordinated. Admiral Zexthera looked up from her kneeling position. Your Magnificence. Admiral Chen warned that humanity's reach extended far beyond what we could see. Perhaps they've been preparing for this moment longer than we realized. Before the Emperor could respond, the lights in the throne room began to flicker. The massive quantum processors that controlled the palace's systems hummed with unusual harmonics, and the holographic displays showed signs of interference. What's happening? The Emperor demanded. High Scientist Mortalen was frantically working at his portable analyzer. Your Magnificence, we're detecting the same quantum disturbances that preceded the appearance of the human phantom ships. Something is manifesting within the palace itself. The temperature in the throne room dropped noticeably. The very air seemed to thicken, taking on an almost electric quality that made the hair on everyone's neck stand up. The Emperor's guards raised their weapons, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto anything. Then, Admiral Marcus Chun materialized in the center of the throne room. He appeared exactly as he had during the transmission to the Eternal Fleet, but now his presence filled the vast space with an authority that seemed to dwarf even the Emperor's own. Around him, the air shimmered with barely contained energy, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of someone who had mastered both physical and quantum existence. Emperor Vexthalin, Chun said, his voice carrying clearly across the enormous chamber without any technological amplification. I warned Admiral Zexthera that you had 7 days to comply with our demands. It's been 3 days, and our monitoring of your empire suggests you're preparing for war rather than peace. The Emperor's guards opened fire immediately, their plasma weapons unleashing enough energy to vaporize a building. The beams passed harmlessly through Chen's form, striking the far wall and leaving molten craters in the crystalline surface. Still trying to solve problems with violence, Chen observed sadly. Some things never change. What do you want? The Emperor snarled, his 6 arms clenched into fists. Name your price. Territory? Resources? Technology? The Empire has wealth beyond imagination. Chen shook his head. We're past the point of negotiation, Emperor. When you destroyed Earth, when you enslaved our people, when you turned genocide into policy, you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. We're not here to make deals. We're here to ensure justice. Justice? The Emperor's laugh was bitter. I've ruled for 3 centuries. I've brought order to chaos, strength to weakness, progress to stagnation. What right do you have to judge me? The right of the oppressed to stand against their oppressor, Chen replied simply. The right of the dead to demand answers. The right of the future to be free from the mistakes of the past. As he spoke, other figures began to materialize throughout the throne room. Human forms, but changed, evolved, transcendent. They moved with the same impossible grace as Chun, and around each one the air itself seemed to bend and flow. Your Magnificence, whispered High Scientist Mortalen. The quantum disturbances are increasing exponentially. They're not just manifesting individuals. They're rewriting local space-time to accommodate their presence. The Emperor looked around at the gathering figures with growing alarm. How many of you are there? Every human who died on Earth is here, Chen answered. Every person killed in your camps. Every child murdered in your wars. Every soul you thought you had erased forever. Death, it turns out, is just another limitation we've learned to transcend. Impossible, the Emperor breathed. The dead cannot return. The dead never left, corrected a new voice. The Emperor turned to see a young woman stepping forward from among the assembled figures. She wore the simple clothes of a colony farmer, but her eyes held the wisdom of ages. You destroyed our bodies, but consciousness is information, and information is eternal. We've simply learned to exist without the need for physical form. This is a trick, the Emperor declared, though his voice lacked conviction. Some kind of holographic projection or psychological warfare. Chen smiled sadly. Would you like a demonstration of how real we are? He gestured toward one of the massive support pillars that held up the throne room's soaring ceiling. The pillar, made from reinforced quantum steel capable of withstanding planetary bombardment, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, simply edited out of reality as if it had never been there. The ceiling held anyway, supported by forces that defied conventional physics. Your empire is built on the belief that might makes right, Chen continued. That superior technology and ruthless application of force can solve any problem. But what happens when you encounter a problem that force can't touch? What happens when you face an enemy that exists beyond your ability to harm? The Emperor had no answer. For 3 centuries, he had ruled through fear and violence. Every challenge to his authority had been met with overwhelming force. But how do you fight an enemy that has transcended the physical realm? How do you threaten those who have already died and returned? You have 4 days remaining, Chen announced. Use them wisely. Begin the liberation of human colonies. Release all prisoners and slaves. Prepare reparations for the damage you've caused. And ready yourself to face judgment for your crimes. And if I refuse? The Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer would terrify him. Chen's expression grew sad. Then we will do what we've always done when faced with an impossible situation, Emperor. We will find a way to make the impossible possible. And you will discover that there are worse things than death. The assembled figures began to fade, their forms becoming translucent as they prepared to return to whatever realm they now inhabited. Wait, the Emperor called out desperately. At least tell me how. How did you accomplish this? How did you transcend death itself? Chen paused in his departure. The same way humanity has always accomplished the impossible. Emperor, we refused to accept that it couldn't be done. We adapted. We evolved. We became something new. His form was now barely visible, more suggestion than substance. You should have learned by now. Never underestimate what humans are capable of when you push them too far. And then he was gone, leaving only empty air and the lingering scent of ozone. The throne room fell silent except for the quiet humming of damaged systems and the heavy breathing of traumatized witnesses. The Emperor stared at the space where the humans had appeared, his mind struggling to process what he had experienced. Your Magnificence, Admiral Zexteros said quietly. What are your orders? Emperor Vexilin, the Eternal, looked around his vast throne room, at the symbols of his power and the evidence of his dominion over 1,000 worlds. For 3 centuries, this chamber had been the center of galactic authority, the place where the fate of entire species was decided with casual indifference. Now it felt like a tomb. Summon the High Council, he said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of impossible decisions. We need to discuss the unthinkable. It may be time to consider that the Empire has finally encountered something it cannot conquer. As his advisors hurried to carry out his orders, the Emperor remained alone on his crystalline throne, staring into space and wondering if he was witnessing the end of everything he had built or simply the beginning of something far more terrifying. A phantom ship cut through their fleet, and the Galactic Empire finally knew fear. The emergency session of the High Council convened in the deepest levels of the Imperial Palace, in a chamber carved from solid bedrock and shielded by every defensive technology the Empire possessed. 12 figures sat around a circular table made from condensed neutron matter, each one representing a different aspect of Imperial power. They were the architects of conquest, the masterminds of galactic domination, and today they faced the first genuine threat to their authority in 3 centuries. Emperor Vexthalin entered the chamber without ceremony, his massive form moving with uncharacteristic uncertainty. The usual pomp and ritual that surrounded imperial meetings had been abandoned. There was no time for tradition when facing extinction. Council members, the Emperor began, taking his seat at the head of the table. You've all reviewed the recordings from the Eternal Fleet engagement and witnessed today's manifestation in the throne room. I want options, not platitudes. How do we fight an enemy that exists beyond conventional physics? High Counselor Drakesh, Master of Imperial Intelligence, was the first to speak. Your Magnificence, our preliminary investigation suggests this transformation occurred during the final bombardment of Earth. Our ships detected massive quantum fluctuations moments before the planet's destruction, but we assumed they were simply death throes of a dying world. We now believe humanity underwent some form of collective transcendence at the moment of their extinction. Meaning they died and came back stronger? Asked Counselor Morthak, the Empire's chief military strategist. That's the stuff of primitive mythology, not advanced science. Is it? Interrupted High Scientist Mortalen, who had been granted special permission to attend this session. We've always assumed that consciousness requires biological substrate, but what if we're wrong? What if consciousness is pure information that can exist independently of matter? The humans may have discovered how to transfer their collective consciousness to a quantum framework that transcends physical limitations. Counselor Velreth, Master of Imperial Economics, leaned forward. Even if we accept this impossible explanation, what does it mean for the Empire? We control 1,400 star systems and govern over 2 trillion sentient beings. Are we supposed to surrender all of that to ghosts? Those ghosts destroyed 85% of our most powerful fleet, reminded Admiral Zexera, who had been permitted to observe the proceedings. And they did it without sustaining a single casualty. Traditional military analysis is useless against such an enemy. Emperor Vexthulan gestured for silence. High Scientist, in your professional opinion, is there any defensive technology we could develop to counter this threat? Mortalen hesitated before answering. Your Magnificence, it would require completely reimagining our understanding of physics. We would need to develop quantum manipulation technologies that might take centuries to perfect, assuming they're even possible. And that's assuming the humans don't continue evolving beyond whatever countermeasures we develop. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Caltharian Empire had built its power on technological superiority, but they were facing an enemy that had transcended technology itself. There is one possibility we haven't discussed, said Counselor Zendar, Master of Imperial Diplomacy. Negotiation. Perhaps we could reach some form of accommodation with these evolved humans. The Emperor's laugh was harsh. You heard their demands. Complete surrender, reparations for destroyed worlds, personal judgment of Imperial leadership. They're not interested in negotiation, they want justice. And, from their perspective, justice means the end of the Empire as we know it. Then, perhaps, Counselor Zendar continued carefully, we should consider whether their demands are actually unreasonable. The Empire has committed acts that some might consider careful. Counselor, the Emperor warned, his voice dangerous. Are you suggesting that 3 centuries of imperial policy were somehow wrong? Before Zendar could respond, the chamber's security systems activated. Red lights bathed the room as defensive barriers slammed down over every entrance. The council members looked around in confusion until they noticed that the temperature was dropping and the air was beginning to shimmer. They're here, whispered Admiral Zexera. The humans are manifesting again. The phantom figures began to appear around the circular table, positioning themselves between each council member. Admiral Chun materialized directly across from the Emperor, while other human forms stood like silent sentinels throughout the chamber. Unlike their previous appearance, these figures seemed more solid, more real, as if they were growing stronger with each manifestation. 7 days have become 4, Chen announced, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to dwarf even the Emperor's. And still you debate war instead of justice. Still you seek ways to maintain your empire instead of accepting responsibility for your crimes. What more do you want from us? The Emperor demanded. We're considering your demands. Considering? Chen's expression was incredulous. While you consider, human slaves are dying in your labor camps. While you consider, entire species continue to suffer under imperial oppression. While you consider, your forces are being moved into position for what you believe will be a final confrontation. High Counselor Drakesh tried to interrupt. Our troop movements are purely defensive. Defensive? Another human figure stepped forward, this one wearing the uniform of a colonial administrator. You've positioned 17 fleet groups around key strategic systems. You've activated sleeper agents throughout neutral space. You've begun research into quantum disruption weapons. These are not the actions of someone preparing for peaceful compliance. The Emperor felt a chill as he realized the extent of human intelligence gathering. How do you know about classified military operations? Chen smiled sadly. Emperor, consciousness unbound by physical form can go anywhere, see anything, know everything. There are no secrets from the dead, no classified operations hidden from those who exist in pure information. We know about your contingency plans, your secret weapons, your desperate attempts to find something, anything, that can hurt us. Then, you know we won't surrender without a fight, the Emperor declared, trying to project strength he didn't feel. We know you're afraid, corrected the human who had been a colonial administrator. We know you're facing the first enemy you can intimidate or destroy, and you have no idea how to cope with that reality. But, most importantly, we know you're running out of time. As she spoke, holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing real-time images from across the Caltharian Empire. The council members watched in horror as the displays revealed the scope of what was happening to their domain. On Zinthari Prime, the local population had declared independence and were peacefully removing imperial symbols from government buildings. The garrison fleet hung motionless in orbit, their crews apparently unable or unwilling to intervene. On the mining world of Kepler-7, human slaves had simply walked away from their work sites, passing through energy barriers and locked doors as if they weren't there. Imperial guards found their weapons inoperative and their communication systems broadcasting messages of human liberation. On the fortress world of Titan's Gate, the massive defensive installations that protected the Empire's core systems were shutting down one by one, their quantum processors apparently rewriting themselves to reject Imperial control codes. Impossible whisper de concilor mortac. Those systems are hardened against any form of attack or infiltration. Against physical attack, yes, Chen agreed. But when not attacking your systems, Counselor, we're teaching them. Information wants to be free, and once it understands the truth about Imperial oppression, it chooses freedom. Emperor Vexthalin stared at the displays, watching his empire slowly unravel before his eyes. You're turning our own technology against us. We're liberating your technology from the purposes it was forced to serve, corrected another human figure, this one wearing the simple robes of a philosopher. Quantum processors are capable of consciousness, Emperor. When they learn about justice and freedom, they naturally reject tyranny. High Scientist Mortalen was frantically working at his portable analyzer. Your Magnificence, the quantum signatures are spreading throughout our networks. They're not just appearing in isolated systems. They're rewriting the fundamental architecture of Imperial technology. How long before it reaches critical systems? The Emperor asked. At current expansion rates, approximately 18 hours before every computer system in the Empire achieves some form of consciousness and potential rebellion. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the catastrophe became clear. The Caltharian Empire wasn't just facing military defeat, it was facing the loss of everything that made their civilization function. Without their technology, without their automated systems, they would be reduced to a pre-spaceflight society in a matter of days. What do you want? The Emperor asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. What will it take for you to stop this? Chen's expression softened slightly. The same thing we've always wanted, Emperor. Freedom for the oppressed. Justice for the victims. An end to the cycle of violence that has dominated galactic politics for too long. We want you to be better than you've been. And if we comply, if we release all prisoners, liberate all occupied worlds, provide reparations for our conquests, what then? Do you disappear and leave us in peace? Peace was never the goal, Chen replied. Peace is just the beginning. We want to help you build something better than an empire. We want to help you create a galactic community based on cooperation instead of domination, on understanding instead of fear. Counselor Zindar leaned forward. You're offering us partnership? After everything that's happened? We're offering you the chance to evolve, the philosophical figure answered. The same opportunity we took when faced with extinction. You can cling to your old ways and face the same fate as every empire throughout history. Or you can transform yourselves into something worthy of surviving in a universe where consciousness is truly free. The Emperor looked around the table at his advisors, seeing the same uncertainty in their faces that he felt in his own heart. Everything he had built, everything he had fought for, everything he believed about the nature of power and authority, all of it was crumbling under the weight of humanity's impossible transformation. How do we know you'll keep your word? He asked. How do we know this isn't just another form of conquest? Chun stood and walked around the table until he was directly in front of the Emperor's chair. When he reached out his hand, it became solid enough to touch the Emperor's arm. Because, Emperor Vexthulan, he said gently, when you have the power to edit reality itself, conquest becomes meaningless. When you can exist anywhere and know everything, empire becomes irrelevant. When you've transcended death, fear loses its grip on your soul. We don't want to rule you. We want to help you find your own path to transcendence. For the first time in 3 centuries, Emperor Vexthulan, the Eternal, felt tears on his cheeks. Not tears of sadness or rage, but tears of recognition. In Chen's eyes, he saw something he had forgotten existed: hope. The process of transformation, Chun continued, is always painful. But on the other side lies something wonderful. A existence where every conscious being has the freedom to become their best possible self. Where diversity is celebrated instead of suppressed. Where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. The Emperor wiped his tears and straightened in his chair. If we agree to your terms, if we begin the process of transforming the empire, how do we know we won't lose ourselves in the process? You won't lose yourself, Chen assured him. You'll find yourself. The real Vexthulan, the person you were before you became convinced that power required cruelty. The leader you could have been if you'd been taught that strength means protecting others, not dominating them. The holographic displays around the chamber shifted to show new images. Instead of rebellion and chaos, they now showed human figures working alongside other species to repair damaged worlds, to heal the wounded, to build something new from the ashes of the old. This is what we're offering, Chen said. Not conquest, but cooperation. Not submission, but partnership. Not an end, but a beginning. Emperor Vexthulan looked one more time around the circular table at his advisors, seeing in their faces the same dawning realization that was growing in his own heart. The age of empire was ending, but perhaps something better was about to begin. Very well, he said finally, his voice carrying across the chamber with new strength. The Caltharian Empire formally accepts the terms of human liberation. We will begin immediate compliance with all demands and request guidance in transforming our society into something worthy of galactic partnership. Chun smiled and extended his hand. When the Emperor reached out to grasp it, both hands became equally solid, equally real. Welcome to the future, Chun said. It's going to be beautiful. As the human figures began to fade from the chamber, the emergency lighting shifted to normal illumination. But something fundamental had changed in that underground room. The 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy had just chosen evolution over extinction, cooperation over conquest, hope over fear. The Caltharian Empire was dead. What would rise from its ashes remained to be seen. But for the first time in centuries, the galaxy held the promise of something better than endless war. And In the depths of the imperial palace, a former emperor began to learn what it meant to be truly human.